The NaviPro IT Break, 15 entertaining minutes with our experts on hot topics. They're designed to help you keep up to date on the latest IT trends.
Well, welcome everyone to be at our IT Breaks. This is our episode 63. We're going to be talking about endpoint security, and today I've got the pleasure to be accompanied with John Beal and Vivienne Suen, who are at IBM Security. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, so everybody's facing the same issue, endpoint security. How can we help?
Well, endpoint security is really complicated now. There is no perimeter to the organization anymore. The organization is wherever those endpoints happen to be. And when you talk about the future of work and hybrid and remote work, this is what's happening. Your control points, your data access points, everything, it's still on people's kitchen tables, and that's not going to change. So when we no longer have a defined organization perimeter, the way we monitor and the way we manage those endpoints is really under sharp review now. Some of the complacency that we had before with people doing things on-prem before the stampede to cloud, that's just not going to cut it anymore. And there's two pieces of endpoint security that you have to address. One of them is hygiene, just good old-fashioned basic hygiene, and the other is how you do that real-time detection and monitoring and remediation. So those were the two aspects of endpoint security that we wanted to talk to about today.
Yeah, we have to take in consideration today that the endpoint is actually the new edge. So it's not just one firewall, one place. It's multiple edge everywhere with no control of the environment.
Yeah, and that's part of the problems with VPN access, right? It frightens people sometimes it can be considered a contentious statement to say that VPNs are no longer a good thing. But the point of the VPN is that it gives that all access tunnel to an endpoint that from an administrator's point of view, if for all intents and purposes, all of those endpoints are in the wild. You have to treat them as if they're in the wild.
Yeah, actually, they really are.
They are.
What the funny thing is, Roger, you said, the endpoint is the new perimeter, or maybe it was Vivienne who just said it. I had a presentation 10 years ago, and that was the title of it. This is a 10-year-old problem. And I told everybody, and I went across Canada, because I was responsible for our endpoint security solutions back then. And I told everybody, this is coming. And I said, what you need to do is you need to have visibility of all your endpoints, whether they're on the network or off the network. The hybrid model at IBM has been going on long before COVID. And I said, you need to have real-time visibility on your endpoints. You need to patch any holes, or any updates as quick as you can across those endpoints. And 3, you have to start enforcing your security policies. So, for example, if you're a retail operation, you have PCI as a security policy. Well, that's 200, at the last time I checked, 233 different checks on an endpoint to make sure it is compliant to PCI. And I just read an article, there's a new version of that coming out. So I said this, 10 years ago, and here we are today. It's still a problem. And back then, we were saying, when we talked to our X-Force experts who were spying on the bad guys on the dark web, nobody was buying a 0-day exploit kit because the patching and the hygiene was so terrible amongst organizations that, years later, big organizations like Equifax are being taken down by a patch or a patch hole. Mm-hmm. So, here we are. But that time has kind of come where, and Vivienne will talk about this, where the 0-day exploit is now becoming popular.
And it is. And I've seen customers where, today they're talking about Vivienne, we're talking about the VPN. I have a customer that what he wants is a machine VPN. The machine sees internet, VPN automatic, no user login, no nothing. I said, okay.
Wow.
And I see his logic. I have control.
Right.
So as soon as the machine is on, I have control. I can manage that machine. I can do whatever I want. I'm working with the data. Imagine with the new law we have in Quebec, the 24
Bill
law.
64. Yeah.
Well, now it's 25, and you'll have access to all sort of data. But again, from environment, you have no control. Last weekend, I had my girlfriend and her kids. So we had 5 laptops running in here, and well, accessing the office.
Well, that's exactly it, right? Your corporate environment is only as secure as every employee and everyone who gets on their Wi-Fi. We have a very well traveled story about a colleague of ours in the Q Radar lab who had a babysitter who came like every week to watch his daughter while he and his wife would go out on their date nights. And the babysitter had an iPhone, and she would always connect to their Wi-Fi. And because he works in the Q Radar lab, he had Q Radar Community Edition running on his home network, and he noticed that there was something funky going on with her iPhone. Long story short, babysitter's phone had malware. And was pinging out to these random time servers in India and the Ukraine. Now, because he was on top of this and understood exactly what he was looking at, nothing bad happened, and the babysitter got a new iPhone out of the deal. But I mean, how many of us take the trouble to do or are capable of that kind of monitoring on our home networks? Not that many, right? There's not a lot of solutions in the consumer space that can do that kind of monitoring. But now the blurring of the lines between public and private, has made that a very real concern. So, from a corporate point of view, from an enterprise point of view, you've got to start looking at how you're managing those endpoints. And signature-based detection isn't enough. Whatever worked for you for patch hygiene 4 or 5 years ago is not going to work now. 4 or 5 years ago, we saw almost very, very, very little zero-day exploits. It is a very infrequent thing, and now that's not the case anymore because the adversaries have figured out how easy it is to scale those kinds of attacks. So we've seen the rise of zero-day attacks in the last 4 years. It's been rising dramatically. And just last year, Log4j was the second most common exploited vulnerability, despite the fact that it was only discovered in December, right? We found this thing right before Christmas, and it was the number 2 exploited vulnerability in the world. And the effects of that are going to be incredibly long-reaching. So, we see the vulnerability exploits go up, which means that you've got to look at your endpoints. You've got to have that complete stability, as John said. You've got to have an appropriate patching strategy because, the 0 days are back. And at the same time, malware is getting smarter. So signature-based detection alone is not enough. We now have fileless attacks that don't have a file signature. We now have polymorphic malware that rewrites itself. So you have to find ways when you're looking at your solutions, you've got to ask the question, can you also do behavioral analysis of my endpoint? And can you do this in a way that does not degrade performance and that is difficult for the bad guys to evade or tamper with? Because if I'm a bad guy, one of the first things I'm going to do is try to sneak past or disable the EDR, right? That's one of the first things I'm going to do because that endpoint is my entry into the organization.
And they take their time. When you have a breach, once they're in, they can take. On the average, I think it's 6 months before they started. So 6 months of learning the environment, getting the data out, escalating privilege.
Yeah.
By the time they hit the button, they know more the environment or your environment than you do.
Yeah, we've been doing the cost of the data breach study with the Podimon Institute for about 5 or 6 years now. And very consistently, the global average for the time to detect and contain a data breach is around 260 to 280 days. The Canadian number is a tiny bit lower than that, but it's still like 200 and something. So you're talking about what, 6, 7, 8 months before you detect that. So again, this is what we know. They find their way in, and the adversary lives off the land for weeks, months before they actually detonate whatever it is they're there to do.
So they got your data. They got everything out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why the dual exploit attacks have been so successful, right? They find your data, they exfiltrate it, they detonate the ransomware, and then if you refuse to pay the ransom, they expose your data because they stole it at the same time. And that's what's made people pay. A shocking number of people who paid the ransom in the Sedina Kibi ransomware attack, a large percentage of them had their data leaked anyway, even though they had paid the ransom.
Well,
Yeah.
it's double dip and triple dip. They go after you want the decryption key. Okay, fine, but
Yeah.
then pay me again for not sharing the data, and then pay me again because of that you use your data, and
Yeah.
then it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And when you pay, you might get a key, or you get 100 keys. Find your key in there. Enjoy.
Oh no, that's so awful. And it's we've always talked about defensive depth in this industry, and I've always resisted people who use like castle or house metaphors because the enterprise no longer looks like a house. I don't think it's an analogy that stands up anymore. But the idea that you need layered defenses and you need compensating controls is still very, very real. So the endpoint is your first line of defense. And then like your data security and how you're protecting that sensitive data at the end of that road, that's kind of your last line of defense. And then all the other detection stuff is everything in between. And you need compensating controls too. You need process controls should the technical controls fail, right? And you need things around all of those areas. And it starts with what happens on the endpoint. You can't just rely on people to act as a human firewall. Because what we've seen is that a lot of phishing attacks these days and social engineering, they're making phone calls now. People are apparently so starved for human contact that if a phishing attempt is followed up by a phone call, then it's something like 3 times more effective if they just pick up the phone and call you as well. Because people are people, and they're always going to be people. You can't change who your people are. So you need sophisticated endpoint monitoring. You need to move beyond signature-based detection. You need to be on top of your patching and hygiene, because that is your first line of defense.
So how you're with IBM, so I'm sure you have something that can help because talking about endpoints. Don't we think about IBM for endpoints?
Oh no,
I guess you have something. I know you have something now. So
yeah,
help us
we
out.
do, and it's pretty new. So we used to have Big Fix, which was a really good endpoint management uh, solution, and then we divested that. But last year we acquired a company called Reacta, and Reacta is a company headquartered in Europe and Singapore, and they are machine learning and security specialists. And they have some very, very cool technology. What they have basically done is they have separated the signature detection from the behavioral detection, and they do the behavioral detection from what's from a proprietary nano OS agent that sits outside of the operating system. That means that it's not detectable by malware. The bad guys don't know it's there. It also means that it doesn't degrade the performance, and it means that we can observe the behavior of the endpoint from outside. And then we have our own machine learning models behind that. And React has performed very, very well in the MITRE ATT&CK studies. And they're very well known in Europe and in Asia. Now they're part of the IBM security story. I'm pretty excited about it, as you can tell. It's frankly one of the coolest things that IBM's acquired in recent memory.
Very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. So I'm very curious to see how is going to be the adoption of the products. Like I said, we're not used to think about endpoints on the IBM, but we're used to IBM having great products.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
guess
a lot of the big network vendors are all going to the endpoint now. Apollo, Cisco, everybody's looking to the endpoint because with the threat landscape the way it is these days, that is the first line of defense.
yeah, and like you said before, the signature base pretty much useless.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was useless 10 years ago.
I agree with you guys.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much at our 15 minutes of IT breaks. I want to remind people that you will be able to see this IT breaks on our content hub. And Vivienne, John, I guess if you could have some white papers or something you can share that we could put on our content hub so people can, take a look. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. We'll share some of that content with you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Always a pleasure. And soon we will have a lunch.
That would be great.
Good.
It's always good to see you, Roger.
Great seeing you guys again.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You want access to a range of cutting-edge information? Go to our online content area at hub.novipro.com.